They've got the fake one for mom and dad and grandma or whoever, and then they have their real Instagram. But I know that it's hard for parents. They often feel helpless, like there's nothing they can do because they're not in their child's social world.
Now, I don't know if this is true all the time, but don't all kids end up becoming adults one day? And so isn't it okay that they're kind of skipping a stage to go be friends with adults?
They struggle with picking up on social cues. So if they barge into a game on the, the play deck at school and they're annoying people, they don't notice that necessarily.
By the time he was 4 years old, my son Jacob racked up over 100 surgeries, and he spent the better part of his first 5 years in the hospital. There definitely was a social disconnect for Jacob in the traditional school setting. He is a very caring kid and kind of like an old soul. And I think that peers didn't understand Jacob. So Jacob struggled to have really any meaningful friendships. And it's sad because you certainly want your child, and I want Jacob to have friends.
At my old school, I felt hopeless, disappointed, sad, and angry because I couldn't really get anywhere, like I wasn't getting anywhere. Didn't have any friends. I didn't have any support that I needed to succeed. And it just made me very sad and depressed. I felt rejected and not accepted for who I am.
The bullying got so bad that kids were kicking the back of Jacob's chair and his hearing aids would come flying out. Kids threatening to hurt him, being hit physically. And when it got to be physical, that's when my husband and I had said, this is enough. We've got to get him to a different environment.
Some students don't just struggle with academics, they struggle to connect. In this episode of Learning Differently, we talked to Dr. Liz Laugeson about what social struggles look like in school, why they're so often misunderstood, and how we can better support students in building real, meaningful peer connections. Dr. Liz Laugeson is a clinical professor at UCLA and the founder of the UCLA Peers Clinic, a leading social skills program for teens and young adults with autism. She's an internationally recognized expert in evidence-based social interventions and the author of The Science of Making Friends. Her work has helped neurodiverse students build meaningful connections and thrive socially. Dr. Laugeson, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here.
Today's episode is so important for us. We're talking about social struggles, social challenges, and a sense of belonging. When we talk about social struggles, what does that actually mean? Let's set the groundwork for that.
Regardless of what the presenting concerns are, whether a kid is neurodivergent, maybe they're on the autism spectrum, they have ADHD, depression, anxiety, we typically see two types of kids who struggle socially. And they're either peer rejected or socially neglected. And they look really different in presentation. The peer-rejected kids are the kids who are actively seeking out their peers, but they're actively getting pushed away. So they may be doing things that other people don't like maybe they're barging into conversations, they're off topic, maybe they're talking about the same thing over and over, and they're getting pushed away, but they are trying. Those are the peer-rejected. Then you have this other group of kids, and they're more socially neglected. Those are the kids who aren't even trying to socially engage their peers. They're often seen as shy or timid or withdrawn, and they kind of go unnoticed by their peers. So those are the types of issues that we see kids presenting with when they're struggling socially.
So let's take that apart a little bit then. The peer rejected. What are you seeing, or what are educators seeing in terms of that, or what are parents kind of seeing that in terms of signs that might be going on?
Yeah, some of the behaviors I described, where they're actively seeking others out but getting pushed away, they look a lot like those externalizing behaviors that you hear people talk about. Kids who are more likely to have impulse control issues, for example. You can almost predict socially what's happening with kids when they're struggling based on things like even diagnoses. Think about it. What type of kid is more likely to barge into conversations, be off topic, talk about the same thing over and over, and not really pick up on the social cues? probably a neurodivergent kid, maybe a kid who's on the spectrum, maybe a kid with ADHD and impulse control issues, not knowing that they're doing these things, but really actively trying to socially engage others. Then you see the kids who are socially neglected. Those are more the internalizers, right? Those are the kids who are more likely to have things like depression or anxiety. They're not even trying to socially engage others. The good news, though, is that regardless of whether a kid is peer rejected or socially neglected, ultimately the strategies that we're going to use to help them, which I know we're going to talk about later, they're going to be the same. And that's because we just want to teach them good social strategies that are helpful for young people.
Yeah. And so, what I'm hearing you say is that really this experience for our students, our children, it's so multi-layered, right? Especially for neurodiverse students. So is there a way for us as educators, as parents, to begin to identify the differences of when it's a social challenge and when is it something else?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at the data, right? That's what I always talk about with parents is look at the data. Are your kids having get-togethers with their friends or play dates? Are they socializing with other kids on the playground or at lunchtime? Are they invited to birthday parties? What does their social world look like? Because a lot of parents will say, well, I don't know if my kid has friends. I'm not at school with them. Look at the data. When they text people, do they text them back? When they ask them to do things. And if we're seeing that kind of rejection, there's solutions. There's things we can do about that. But I know that it's hard for parents. They often feel helpless, like there's nothing they can do because they're not in their child's social world. And there's a lot we can do behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's so well said. I also find as a parent too, sometimes I can tend to make, assumptions like my child is, what are some of those generalizations? They're introverted, they're extroverted. But again, layers, asking questions and tuning in.
So as parents, we often want to help. We want to see that hurt go away, that rejection go away. And so oftentimes we offer advice to kids. But what are some of the common mistakes that we make as parents?
I'm so glad you asked that question because what I found is that really, really well-intentioned parents and also teachers, adults in general, they'll sometimes give really bad advice when it comes to social situations. And it's so interesting because even though you might have pretty good social skills and have friends, that doesn't mean you know how to teach your kid or someone else's kids about social skills. So a really good example of this is what kids are told to do to make new friends. Okay, so imagine it's the first day of school. The kid doesn't know anybody at school, but they want to meet people. What might their parent or some, again, well-intentioned adult tell them to do to meet new people? They'll say to go up and do what?
Yeah. Say hello or introduce yourself. Tell them your name. Ask them their name.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have asked this question for 20 years and I get the same reply. Yeah, from everybody. And across the globe, by the way. It's not just here in the U.S. So they're told to, go up and say hi, go up and introduce themselves. Have you ever thought about what that would look like? Imagine that, I don't know you and I walk up to the two and I say, hi, I'm Liz, right? What would you think of me?
Go away, Liz.
Like, you're weird, Liz, right? Like, that's
where'd you come from, Liz?
Yeah. You're clearly strange.
Yeah.
Would you want to talk to me at that point? I mean, you're nice people, but really, would you want to talk to me? I mean, it's kind of awkward, right? Yeah. So that's what's happening. We're kind of giving this inappropriate advice. And so we want to correct that by giving them what's called ecologically valid social skills. That's a very technical term, but what it means is we want to teach what socially successful kids are doing and even adults are doing to meet new people. And it's not go up and say hi or introduce yourselves.
I believe that as human beings, we long for connection. I have that inherent belief, I guess, and hope. So what does that? I mean, what would you say to a student who is looking for a connection, a sense of belonging? How do they step into that? How do they start to make those first connections?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's different strategies, different steps to all of this. One thing would be to try to put yourself in environments where you kind of share common interests with people. So, for example, even in a school setting, there's extracurricular activities and clubs, and friendships are really based on common interests. Think about that. Think about who you're friends with. Yeah. You probably have things in common. Those are the things you talk about with your friends. Those are the things you do with your friends. So putting them in those places where they're going to naturally have things in common is a helpful first start. It's not a guarantee, though. You have to engage with those people, too. And it's not go up and say hi and introduce yourself. So what people do to enter conversations, imagine you show up at this new club and you've never been there, you don't know anyone. Well, first you probably watch from a distance, kind of listen to the conversations that are going on around you, right? But you don't want to look like the creepy stalker in the corner, like, staring at people. So people will often use their phone or some prop to look distracted, but they're listening. They're eavesdropping, but they don't want to look like they're eavesdropping. You probably do this all the time. You just don't think about it. So then you're not going to just, enter on any conversation. You need to know something about the conversation, find a common interest. Let's say you find one, you're not going to just yell from across the room, right? What are you going to do with your body rather than yelling from across the room?
Turn towards the person?
Yeah, turn towards them, move closer, right? Not too close. We say no closer than about an arm's length away, right? And you don't want to interrupt the conversation. So what are you going to wait for?
A pause.
Yep, a little pause. You both got it.
Yep.
A little pause in the conversation. There's never a perfect pause. Just try not to interrupt too much. And then you're going to say something that's on topic, right? You're going to either make a comment, you're going to ask a question, you're going to give a compliment, something that's on topic. And it's almost like when you're joining that conversation, it's almost like you were already there because you're just kind of slipping into that conversation casually. And so those are what are called ecologically valid strategies for teaching social skills. That's what we need to actually teach parents to teach their kids, because not all kids come hardwired with these skills, but they can learn them.
Well, I have enough friends, so I don't need any of these skills. Well, okay, let's think about this. So, Doc, I put myself in a club, and there's a teacher that's sponsoring this club. Let's say it's Dungeons and Dragons, or it's art club. Like as an adult, I want to also help facilitate some of the socialization in that club setting.
Right.
Like, what are some tips for me rather than saying, "Oh, you should go sit next to that kid"?
Yeah.
Or maybe I do. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're on the right track here, right? So we're not going to just put them together and assume that the friendship is going to develop sort of naturally. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But a teacher trying to, help to initiate some interaction with other students would be, hey, I noticed that so-and-so really likes, and I don't really know Dungeons and Dragons, so help me out.
Let's use our club. Let's use our club then.
Oh, an art club. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I noticed that you like drawing superheroes. Look, Billy's also drawing superheroes. You should go ask him about his drawing. So what you're doing there is you're helping them to find the common interest, and that is how people meet. Whether it's joining a group conversation or even starting an individual conversation with someone, sending that child over with a tool, right? Not just go say hi or go talk to them or go be yourself, go make friends. These are all the descriptions of like strategies that kids are given that really aren't strategies. They're concepts, but they're not actual tools. So a tool in this case would be to find that common interest, make a comment, give a compliment, ask a question.
Okay, I love the give a compliment too, because I think it's a stretch sometimes, even as a parent saying, "Hey, kid, you should go to this club, or you should go try out for this track team, or yada yada yada." So, is the compliment or just being able to go up to somebody and saying, "Oh, I like that jacket you're wearing today. Where'd you get it?" Is that a good enough of an opener?
It can be. I mean, if fashion is the interest and all of that, it could be. I mean, I'm picturing like in a restaurant and in the ladies' room, and like women talk to each other all the time about like what they're wearing, and you probably can relate to what I'm talking about. Doesn't mean it's going to lead to a lasting friendship though. So it can be a conversation starter, but it has to lead somewhere beyond that. So just putting people together that have common interest isn't a guarantee of a friendship. There has to be a desire for that too. That's the beauty of a good extracurricular activity. Because think about that. If you choose wisely with an extracurricular activity, the child is doing something that they enjoy. Right. So they're naturally going to know how to talk, like more about what to talk about, and they're not going to be as lost. They're going to have things to ask and, give compliments, things like that. But it's not a guarantee of a friendship. The lovely thing about an extracurricular is that they're there to make friends. It's social. People aren't in an extracurricular activity to work in isolation, right? They're there to be social. Yeah.
How do you validate a child's interest and simultaneously encourage them to try new things?
I mean, what's our goal? You got to think about what's the goal. Is your goal to get kids to be flexible and try new things? Or is the goal to help them make and keep friends? And this comes up a lot around things like video games computer games, because parents are so over their kids with all these video games. They want them to, do other things. So they're always trying to help them find new interests. And rather than do that, I want to move towards that interest. If they really love video games, let's join a gaming club, right? Let's meet other kids who like to play video games. But we also have to teach them how to talk to people there, right? Something I call it trading information, having like the reciprocal two-way conversation. Otherwise, if we're not talking, we're really just engaging in parallel play, right? That's just two kids sitting next to each other playing video games and never conversing, right? Never getting to know each other. That's not how you make friends. So rather than, trying to increase flexibility and find new interests, maybe we should
lean into what they really love.
I agree.
All right, I'm going to play my character of wah wah. Now, tell me though, sometimes you get those kids, especially our teenagers, or perhaps they have depression, where they've lost interests.
Yeah.
And they've lost motivations to go. Like, what's our help there?
Well, I mean, I hear this story a lot. And a lot of times what it is it's kids who really were actively trying to engage their peers once upon a time. And they just went through so much rejection that they kind of give up. And then they're really depressed. And, one of the strongest predictors of mental health problems in adolescence is peer rejection. And it's a lot of kids. It's like 1/3 of kids in a typical middle school or high school are struggling with peer rejection or even social neglect. It's a major problem. I think we first have to have an honest conversation about what they want. Do they want to have friends? Some kids will say they have friends, and they maybe investigate further and they can't name anyone they're friends with, or they name everybody at school, but they've never hung out before. But for the depressed kids, they'll often say, I'm fine. I don't want friends. And so we have to first make sure that whatever we're trying to do to support this kid, that it actually aligns with their social goals. You can't force kids to make friends. You can't force kids to be social. But if you give them the tools that they need to make and keep friends, a lot of those kids who maybe were a little fearful of doing that because of all that past rejection are going to be more open to that. So I think a lot of it really does go back to giving kids tools, giving them strategies, just like we teach them life skills and home economics, right? Like we're not giving kids some of the life skills that they need to be social.
Yeah. In the digital age that we're living in right now with Instagram, so many social media platforms.
Yeah.
MySpace, yeah. Definitely.
MySpace was more of our era.
Oh, okay.
But as a parent, you really sometimes you can't see how they're socializing through those platforms. Mm-hmm. So what are the ways that parents can start to connect with their child to learn about what that social life might look like on the other side of the screen? Mm-hmm. Because it's not always visible.
Yeah. Well, I do encourage parents to follow their kids on social media. And sometimes parents will say things like, well, my kid won't let me follow them on Instagram. What is wrong with that statement? My kid won't let me follow them on, who's paying the for their phone? Who's paying for the internet? Like, I mean, if the kid wants to be on social media, they probably need to be followed, but in a way that's unobtrusive. Don't comment on every single post that your kid puts on Instagram, because that's how they end up with what's called a Finsta. Mm-hmm. Do you know what a Finsta is? Mm-hmm. It's a fake Instagram account, right? They've got the fake one for mom and dad and grandma or whoever, and then they have their real Instagram. So I do want parents to monitor the social media, because it's really easy for kids to make mistakes on social media and get into some sort of social dilemmas around that. But, social media isn't a real reflection of what's happening in real life, right? In person. It's an aspect of socialization. It's a part of the world, but it's not everything. And I think a lot of kids appear to be very socially engaged through their social media, but when you really get down to it in real life, they maybe don't have a lot of close, meaningful friendships. So having conversations, opening up dialogues, putting the phones away at dinner time, sitting around and having a conversation, asking what they did at school, who are they hanging out with, and making sure that kids are having regular access to their peers, being involved in extracurricular activities, having get-togethers or play dates, depending on the age. And really, not do you want to have a play date this week, but who do you want to have a play date with?
Do you have an opinion, Dr. Laugeson, on whether children should have access to their phone in schools?
I mean, honestly, I think get him out of there.
Get
You
'em out
know,
of there.
I
Okay.
do. That's
Yeah.
my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to know why, but we had a book study at Fusion on the anxious generation. I mean, everyone's talking about it. Jonathan Haidt. I mean, there's so much great information in that book, and so we ourselves are deciding as a school community,
Yeah.
what is best for our students, and maybe again, maybe it's not a black or white resolve. It's somewhere in the middle. But I was curious to hear, why you think we should set them aside, even if it's for a portion of the day.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many reasons it really gets in the way of learning, I think, a lot too, because kids get really addicted to their phones and their social media. So it's very hard for them to pay attention. But there's a social aspect too. And it's not just kids in school. I mean, go out to a local coffee shop or a bar, or I mean, we're of an age where we remember what it was like to not, I'm guessing we're of the age where we knew what it was like to not have a cell phone, and you would go out and you would meet people in real life, right? It's so uncommon now to meet people in real life that it's actually called IRL, right? IRL is in real life. It's an acronym now because it's so unusual for people to meet that way. And so I would love to see what it would look like, even socially, for kids to put those phones away and have to interact. And if we continue to allow them to interface with their phones constantly, what I think is happening is we're sort of losing our social skills as a society. People don't know how to engage one another without their phones.
Yeah. And we're just talking about social media. We haven't even entered into the conversation about AI.
Yeah.
Right, which is for another topic. But I think you had a
No,
question.
I'm wondering if there's a correct answer to this. And I know that you work with kids of all adolescents, young adults, folks all across the age range. Is there a magic number in terms of number of close friends that you should be aiming for?
I love this question. Nobody's ever asked that question before, Mike, but I love that question and I have an answer. There's actually decades of research that show that just having one or two close friends, like best friends, is very predictive of adjustment in life. It predicts things like independence later in life, self-esteem, and at its best, it predicts less anxiety, less depression. Just simply having one or two close friends means you are less likely to be depressed or anxious. But remember that other statistic I told you earlier. One of the strongest predictors of mental health problems is peer rejection. So if you want to combat peer rejection, focus on friendships.
But then what about, like, you notice, and this might be personal, you notice your child is hanging out with that one person and they're not necessarily putting themselves out there to meet different people. Is that of concern as a parent or an educator?
Are they happy? Are they happy? Are they depressed? Are they anxious? What is their well-being? I think it's different for everyone. Some kids are overwhelmed by being around too many people. Even in our preschool program, we often recommend that parents have, one-on-one play dates with their kids initially, because it can be a lot of pressure to have a lot of people around. You don't want them to be the third wheel. Even going to birthday parties can be kind of challenging. Everybody's different. Some people thrive in those more one-on-one situations. Others thrive in a group environment. It's just going to depend on the kid. And I think it's okay to have conversations with kids. Let's not assume we know what the correct answer is there. But what we do know is that people don't need a lot of friends. Okay. Most people are good with one or two close friends. And I should mention too, there's different types of friends. Right? There's acquaintances, right? People you don't know very well. There's casual friends. Say, hey, you might be on social media. You don't really hang out. There's regular friends. That's kind of the group of people, you might end up at the same parties, get-togethers. And then there's the best friends. And those are the ones that really seem to make a big difference when it comes to things like mental health. And you just need a couple.
Those close relationships.
Yeah.
One or two.
One or two. Exactly.
Now, what if you're noticing your kid is hanging out with, quote unquote, the wrong group of friends? What have you ever run into that?
Oh my goodness, we hear about this a lot. Yeah. And even, sadly, parents of neurodivergent kids, they'll sometimes want their kids to be friends with more typically developing kids. That one always really hurts my heart a little bit. But, for different reasons, parents, they worry. It's always usually good instincts that they want to help their child. It just doesn't mean that that's maybe the right decision for their child. I think we have to take a closer look at that. I don't always trust when a parent says, I don't want my kid to hang out with this kid. I don't like this kid. I don't just say, okay, let's get them away. I want to actually know why. And I want to really look at that friendship and see what is it adding to this child? Is it a positive influence, or is it something that's hurting that child? And often parents are right when they're having these concerns. And sometimes, it's really more about wanting their kid to be hanging out with more typically developing kids. But ultimately, the truth about friendships is that friendship is a choice. We don't get to be friends with everybody, and everyone doesn't get to be friends with us. There's good choices and there's bad choices. And parents don't really always make the choice either. Yeah. They can encourage friendships, and they can help to change the radar a bit by getting them enrolled in certain social activities with other kids. But ultimately, parents aren't going to be totally choosing who their kids are friends with.
Right. And I think I asked that question out of, if I think back a million years ago when I was in college, especially for teenagers, the influence of parents lessens and lessens, and more of it comes from their peers. Mm-hmm. And if we parents are worried about risky behaviors that group is doing, or maybe that is a group of kids that are just trauma bonding. Yeah. Like, what do we do?
Yeah. I think that one of the first things we do in Peers, and that's a program where we focus on a lot of these different strategies, we talk about those good choices and bad choices. And we ask, do you want to choose someone who's nice and friendly and, someone who you have things in common with? These are all good choices. And we talk about why that is. But likewise, we also talk about the bad choices. Do you want to hang out with someone who's maybe got a bad reputation, might get you in trouble, is very defiant and is in trouble a lot themselves? And we have those conversations. And the truth is that you get your reputation based on who you hang out with. And so just, if you have a friend that's getting into trouble and talking back, getting in trouble in school, people are going to associate you with that behavior, whether you're doing that or not. And so having conversations and discussions with kids about that, while respecting the choice, because they can secretly be friends. I like that part of how
you even phrased within your program. It sounds like you're asking the questions for them to have the opportunity to reflect on what their experience is.
Yeah, we call it sort of Socratic questioning, which I think teachers can relate to, where you're not telling them what to do. You're asking questions in a certain way that helps to identify the answers. But they need to find those answers themselves. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It's going to be a battle of wills. I'd rather help them discover that maybe this isn't a good choice.
Yeah. Would you define friendship and belonging differently or in a similar way?
I think you can feel belonging with a group of people without even having that closeness of a friendship. I feel like belonging is often associated with a sense of community. Mm-hmm. Friendship should include, if it's a good quality friendship, should include belonging. But I don't think belonging always includes friendship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
How did neurodivergent students experience friendship differently?
Yeah. I think because with neurodivergent students, they struggle with things often like social communication, right? Those conversational skills that become really important right around middle school in particular. They struggle with picking up on social cues. So if they barge into a game on the play deck at school and they're annoying people, they don't notice that necessarily. They struggle with things like social awareness and all of these social aspects they struggle with. That makes it more difficult to make and keep friends. They don't come hardwired with the skill set to know how to make and keep friends. And what's really interesting about even typically developing kids is that you could argue that no one really comes hardwired, right? I think a lot of it is through observation and learning that we learn to be social. But if you're not hardwired to pick up on that, then it's a struggle. The good news, though, is that you can teach those skills because they are, in fact, skills. They have tools, right, that we can teach kids that are struggling socially.
So I guess I have a hypothetical then. If we... In my own experience, I've noticed that some of our neurodivergent kids, they can relate more to the adults in their lives, specifically teachers. And they have no problem having a conversation, a friendly conversation with their teachers. Yeah. But then when we throw them back out with their peers, they have challenges. Now, I don't know if this is true all the time, but don't all kids end up becoming adults one day? And so isn't it okay that they're kind of skipping a stage to go be friends with adults?
It's one way of looking at it, but it's interesting that this is not even just true for neurodivergent kids. It's actually true for any kid who's struggling socially. If you look around, you'll notice that they gravitate towards either much older or much younger. Yeah. And if you think about why they do that, much older, they're going to be more accepting and even maybe tolerant of differences, right? And the much younger aren't even going to notice or care about any kind of social differences. So that is not even just for neurodivergent kids that are struggling socially. It's kind of all kids that struggle socially. It's safer with the adults. It's safer with the younger kids.
So what I'm hearing is chronological age doesn't necessarily dictate who a kid should be friends with. It's just more so who's more accepted.
I think that it does matter with age at younger ages because you want friendships to be equal. And so a kid who's a friend with an adult, that's not really an equal kind of friendship. It's probably more of a mentorship, which is a beautiful relationship, and we highly encourage that. And same thing with a much younger kid. They could sort of have a type of friendship. It's not exactly equal. Doesn't mean you don't have that relationship. Those are special relationships. But we also want our kids to be able to have equal friendships too with people that are around the same age as them, not going towards the much older or the much younger because it's safer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm curious to hear about your peers program.
Sure.
How is that set up? And do you acknowledge these age groups and different levels and different strengths, different challenges? What does that look like?
Yeah, I'll answer the second part of the question first about the age. When we first start our program, when we talk about those good choices and bad choices, one of the questions we ask is, should we try to be friends with people who are much older or much younger? And a lot of kids will say no. And you'll ask, why would that be maybe like a more risky choice, for example? And then they'll tell us, and they'll basically describe what I just did. And that's that Socratic method I was talking about. I'm not going to tell a kid they can't be friends with someone much older or much younger. I'm going to talk about what that relationship looks like and how it's different. But it's harder for them to relate to someone who's much older or much younger. They're at different stages of their lives. So again, we want to have those equal friendships. But to answer your question about peers, so peers is one of the only evidence-based social skills programs really on the planet that focuses on things like friendship skills, handling bullying and teasing. And we also have programs around dating and employment. And what makes it sort of unique is that there's this research evidence that shows that it's effective. Most social skills programs don't really research their programs. And so we really research our programs across the globe. We cross-culturally validate them. We also include parents and teachers and other care providers in the social world of the people going through our program. We want to have social coaches out there in the world with them.
Love that.
That can help them, in those social situations. These are time-limited programs, so our kids can go through the program for about 16 weeks. That's not a lot of time in the grand scheme of things, but parents and teachers, they're around the vast majority of the time. So that's another unique aspect. And then finally, I referenced this whole ecologically valid kind of social skills. We have a lot of research that tells us what works and also what doesn't work. And that's what we're teaching. And that's
I would love to talk about what doesn't work because I'm thinking about these structures in a traditional school that very, I would say unintentionally, favor certain social styles and then leave a lot of other kids feeling like outsiders, very othered. So what about traditional school environments make it harder for some students to build friendships?
If they don't know how to navigate their social world because they don't understand it, it's going to be hard to make and keep friends. So let me give you an example. In most typical middle schools and high schools across the planet, you have different groups of kids and they congregate around shared interests. And they even have names, right? So what do we call the kids who are into video games?
Gamers.
The gamers, right? And how would you identify a gamer at school?
My first instinct is not as social.
No,
maybe.
I'm thinking that they're usually carrying around a can of Monster or Mountain Dew and are probably wearing a T-shirt that has the video game that they had on.
Yeah, they've got some gaming logo on their T-shirt. They're playing video games before and after school and during breaks, right? They're talking about video games. They might join a gaming club at school. You got to decode the social world for kids, right? And a lot of kids, they come into school, they start to notice, they're observing, there's these different groups. If I'm into video games, I need to find the gamers because that's what friendships are based on, the common interest. If I'm into computers, I need to find those techies, right? How am I going to identify them? Well, they have the tech logos on their t-shirt, right? They're carrying around, devices, and they're in the computer lab at school. If I'm into art, how do I develop friendships with the artist? We have to look around. We have to decode the social world. That's how it's going to be easier for them to navigate. Joining those extracurricular activities, all of those things where you can meet people with potential common interests.
Dr. Laugeson, at Fusion, we have the global community. Shout out to the global community team who's doing such an amazing job of bringing the social aspects of student life into a virtual setting. I mean, literally, they have so many different clubs going on, and they have students logging in from all over the world. It is truly incredible to watch. And so for me, what comes up for me is this, like, connection doesn't have to be local to be life-changing is what I thought about.
Absolutely.
Is because I have seen these meaningful friendships be formed from not only across the United States, but across the world. And then coming together to see them at graduation, their friendships are not surface level. Their friendships are very meaningful, deep friendships. And it's just really incredible to watch how that can all take shape.
Yeah, absolutely. I talked about the different types of friendships a moment ago. All of those friendships exist online as well. There's online friends, right? You have online acquaintances. There can be more like casual friends online, sort of your regular friends that often gaming with and things like that. And then you can have best friends online as well. So yeah, absolutely. It doesn't have to all be IRL, right? It can be online too.
Yeah.
For parents listening out there and thinking, my kid doesn't have that one friend yet, what's your number one suggestion for parents to help their kids decode the social world?
Yeah. I mean, this is a question that comes up a lot in our programs. And I think the first thing we need to identify is, what is their kid interested in? Like, who are they? What do they like to do? Right. And think about where we might help them find other people that like those same things. And even if you have a kid that says that they don't want to have friends or they have enough friends, you don't have to take the approach of, we need to find you more friends. It could be more around the approach of getting involved in social activities and extracurriculars, but based on their interests. And so sometimes when you go to a kid and you say, do you want to join an extracurricular? They'll say, no, I don't want to do that. Instead of doing that, kids like choices, right? Don't give them the yes or no. Do you want to do this? Which one do you want to join? We're going to join some extracurricular activities this year. So which ones do you want to join? I saw that there was an art meetup at your school. I know you like art. Oh, I saw there's a Dungeons and Dragons group. What would you like to do that? If it's something they like, they're going to be more motivated to want to go there. And then it's going to make the socialization more rewarding because they're doing something they enjoy with people who also enjoy that. So it takes the pressure off of kids to say, let's go make friends. Let's go find friends. Instead, let's just find things you like to do and let's identify some activities we can get you enrolled in.
So we talk about our why a lot at Fusion, which is, the heart of what brought us into our work.
Oh, yeah.
I'm curious about yours. You're so passionate about this topic.
Oh, that's so sweet. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a saying actually in research, because I'm also a researcher, that research is me search. It's like people that are really passionate about what they do, there's usually a story. And I have sort of my professional story and then I have my personal story. So which one do you want to hear? Both. Okay. Yeah. Well, let's start with the personal then. Yeah. So by the time I was 24 years old, I lived in 21 different places. And by the time I got my doctorate, I'd gone to 14 different schools. My social world was constantly changing as a child and even into a young adulthood. And I had to learn how to decode that social world if I was going to have friends. And for me, that equated to being happy. I'm a social person. I want to have friends and be around people. And so I just started watching and observing and decoding my social world wherever I went. And then as I went into the field of psychology and I started working with neurodivergent kids who struggle with decoding their social world, I realized I can help them. Yeah. I know this. I've got this. That doesn't mean I know exactly what to do. I'm going to research this. I'm going to figure out what's ecologically valid, but I know how to decode a social world and I know this can be done and I know it's a skill. And so that's really what drives my passion. I know the importance of friendships. I know what it's like not to have friends, right? Those 21 different places that you all start at ground zero again. And so that's what drives me. That's the personal story.
I think it resonates for me. And even, for us at Fusion, community is such a big value for us. And, we have this homework cafe area where a lot of students gather. And I really love to speak to families about the social component of Fusion. We can talk about academics. We can talk about that part, which I know is also very important. But like to find one or two friends, or to find a caring adult or a caring mentor can literally, in some cases, save a child's life. And so I myself am really passionate about this. My family is originally from Puerto Rico. And, to summarize, I always felt different. I grew up in the city, went to a private school. My family spoke Spanish at home, and I was predominantly not in that world. And Mike and I talk about this a lot, right? And so, in a lot of ways, we were, I would say, othered, and so this is it's a thing that we share in common because, the one or two friends or the adults that cared so much to bring us into community changed everything for us. And so just love this topic. We could talk about it for a long time.
Well, I love your passion, and I could feel the emotion as you were saying all of that. And we need more teachers and educators like the two of you. So thank you for your important work.
I was mentoring a kid for one of our scholarship contests, and this child, he was part of the Fusion Global Academy. So he was medically fragile, so he had to take all his classes from home. And one of the things that he came up with was an app in which kids that signed up for Fusion Global could do an interest survey. And so from day one, they're doing this interest survey, and that it would connect them to the different social offerings throughout. Because he said, it's not for lack of trying. I just need to find my tribe.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. We all need to find our tribe.
I wrote down, because I was thinking about the global community aspect of Fusion, and their vision is promoting world friendship through the universal experience of community. How powerful is that? To go into, and I myself have not experienced many traditional schools to have this much of a focus, but we do, because we see the impact that it has, so.
Yeah, that's great. I love that you guys are so passionate about your work. It's awesome.
Well, Doc, now it's time to separate fact from fiction.
Ooh, okay. This sounds like a game or something.
It is. It is. It's time for some myth busting. And for today, I just have two for you.
Okay.
Myth number 1. Some kids just don't care about having friends.
Oh, myth. I mean, I haven't met that kid yet, but they might exist. I think that's almost never true. I think most kids do want to have friends, want to be socially connected with others, but many of them struggle with that, and some of them give up. And so that's what you're probably seeing, is that they've just given up. They're probably afraid to try, right? Because they've experienced so much rejection.
Yeah. Well, myth number 2.
Okay.
Kids will figure out social stuff and friendship on their own.
Well, I have 20 years of research to say that that's actually a huge myth, that really some kids do figure it out on their own. It's usually through observation. Again, like I said before, it's not like you're hardwired to sort of know how to be social, because your social environment dictates how you are behaving, right? So it's going to be different in any different culture. But you can absolutely teach those skills. So while they might not figure it out on their own, with some help and support and given them some tools, for the toolbox, they can actually learn these skills. And that's very encouraging.
That's some great advice. And I think that gives us all hope that we can help our kids find that one friend. Thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Laugeson. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Your child learns a little differently than other kids, but maybe you're not yet sure what that means. That's why Fusion Academy created a short quiz to help you better understand your students' learning DNA. In just a few minutes, you'll get personalized insights into your students' unique learning preferences, plus tips to better support them at home and in the classroom. Take the quiz today. It's quick, it's free, and it may just unlock your students' full potential. Visit fusionacademy.com/podcast. That's fusionacademy.com/podcast. We know learning differently requires showing up differently. So here are some tools, insights, and strategies to help. It's time for Real Talk, Real Tools. For neurodiverse middle and high schoolers, friendship can be confusing or exhausting, even when they want connection. As a parent, you can support them without adding pressure by meeting them where they are. Start with shared interests, clubs, gaming groups, art, or music activities. Create really natural opportunities to connect without forced conversation. Encourage low-stakes hangouts like co-watching a show, going on a walk, or doing a side-by-side project. You can also talk through real-life situations like how to join a group chat, respond to a text, or navigate social drama. Help them build a toolbox, not a script. Try this. After a social interaction, check in casually. How did that feel for you? And celebrate the small wins. I know that took effort. I'm proud of you for showing up. Connection doesn't have to be loud or constant. For many teens, just being included and accepted is enough.
Well, I think one of the things is when you are thinking about schools for your kid, or, I mean, it could be that grade level transition. It could be that you just moved into the area, or you're thinking about making a change because things just aren't working. I think one of the most important things to research when you're visiting on campus or, gathering literature, searching Google is check out how many extracurricular activities are available to your child at that school. I think Dr. Laugeson really pointed out the importance of helping kids be able to identify with their passions and their interests to find their people.
I mean, one takeaway for me is honestly from that conversation, I came into it thinking even for my own kids, like diversify your interests, expose your kids to as much as possible. And that too can be a benefit. But what I think Dr. Laugeson really showed us is that if you lean into what they really love, if you pour more time into what they really love, that's truly what they need to make meaningful friendships and create meaningful connections.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's why this makes so much sense, because we share so many passions, right? We share so many interests. And friend, thanks for doing the show with me.
At Fusion, Jacob is so much more comfortable talking to peers. So he doesn't feel judged. He doesn't feel bullied. Fusion has been a godsend for Jacob.
I struggled socially in my old schools, but now I'm able to better connect with peers at Fusion through clubs like Student Ambassadors, because I had the opportunity to connect with others to help towards a common goal.
There's no way that Jacob would be the confident 18-year-old. I'm gonna start crying. There's no way that Jacob would be the confident 18-year-old that he is today in the traditional school setting. He loves being at school. He actually is excited to see his teachers. He is interested in the course content, and he really wants to do a good job because he's happy at Fusion. When he was first born, he was so medically challenged, nobody knew if he could even go to school. And now Jacob is a senior, he's about ready to graduate, and we are so very proud of him. And Fusion has been the biggest part of that.
Fusion is special to me and to everyone because you get the opportunity to make really personal and close relationships with your teachers, relationships that you won't be able to make at a public school because there are 20 or 30 kids in a class rather than just one student with one teacher. And they pour their hearts and souls into adapting their classes to their students' needs, which I am forever grateful for.
And now, my favorite part of the show, where the numbers, the neuroscience, and the public policy intersect. It's time for the Research Roundup. There are two big ones that I want to point out today. There's a study from Dr. Elizabeth Wenzel and her colleagues that found students with strong peer relationships, they show better long-term academic outcomes. It's a really important finding because I think parents, they tend to think of their students' social life and academic life as very different parts, but they are truly interconnected. And there's another study by Cappadocia and Weiss that found students with ADHD or autism are significantly more likely to experience social exclusion. These students aren't just dealing with their learning difference, they're having to navigate other challenges that stem from it as well.
Mike, so many parents that we talk to are more worried at this point in their children making friends than they are in their grades. And the research that you shared with us really shows me that they're right to be. Belonging is foundational for them.
I agree. I mean, I think about what we can do as a school to provide support systems, as parents, what we can do to provide support systems. But really, it's their peers, their friends, and what we learned today, that one close friend is really going to be the game changer in terms of unlocking this kid's potential.
It's tough to hear how these students are being excluded, but there's also hope in what we can do to help them.
Yeah, Lee, I'm thinking about all the things that we can do as parents and educators to help facilitate, with the understanding that we are armed with today in terms of understanding the specific challenges that kids on the spectrum or kids with ADHD and their impulsivity have, right? How can we set up the forums and opportunities, the clubs, the student interest organizations, things like that, and be very deliberate in terms of those spaces for these kids?
I want to take the opportunity to call out our directors of student life at Fusion, our global community at Fusion, who are dedicated to ensuring that our kids feel connected, that our kids are involved, that our kids find those one or two friends or the interests that they really love. The work that they're doing is so incredible. It's so needed and valued.
I 100% agree. I mean, I think that they have one of the most important jobs they have on our campuses, right? They are the social connectors for kids. They're not only that academic resource, but they're coordinating all the student programming throughout the year. They're coordinating all the programming, the clubs that are going on during lunchtime. And they're also giving parents that feedback of, hey, look, I saw Timmy today talking to a friend today, and it's because they just joined this club. And I think that feedback, I don't know that comes from many schools.
Thanks so much for joining us on Learning Differently. We are grateful that you're here, doing the work, asking the questions, and showing up for the students who need it most. Supporting learners who think and experience the world differently takes curiosity, care, and corazón, heart. Because when we understand how they learn,
we unlock who they can become.
We will see you next time.